Good morning and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. We got someone today who makes New Haven tick and is definitely usually behind, not always the headlines. Carol Horsford of Farnham Realty. Carol, welcome to WNHH's Dateline New Haven.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Nice to have you here today. So Carol's got a very interesting story, and we're going to get to that story about how she built up one of the most successful real estate firms in the area. But it's also timely because we are now 19 months into our world changing from the COVID-19 pandemic. And it changed our world in a lot of ways we didn't expect. Obviously, for the most part, it was a crisis, but there's also opportunity in crisis and unintended aspects to it. So both in our personal lives and our business lives, COVID didn't and hasn't always played out the way we thought. And the real estate industry has been one of the most interesting roller coasters because, as the people in New Haven know, houses are going for prices they never have before with incredible competition. And that has meant pivots for the people on the ground on the real estate industry. So, Carol Horsford, welcome again. What I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about COVID in the real estate industry, and then we'll take a step back and talk about how you built your own practice up. Does that sound good?
Sure. Sounds great.
All right. So I live in Westville, and when a house goes on the market in Westville, there's this feeding frenzy. So there's a block for mine on Central Avenue. This was a few months ago. A house went on the market that had sold, I think it was like 150, 200,000 a bunch of years before that. And it was, I believe, priced over 300. The minute the open house started, it went for sale in the morning. 9 offers came to that owner, each of them offering more than the owner was asking by tens of thousands of dollars. And that, I'm told, this was happening all over the city. So in your experience, Carol, is that still happening? And was that all over the city?
I would say it was all over the state. But particularly in New Haven, there's certain neighborhoods that families or folks want to live in. And there was more competition on certain streets. And I also just think that the interest rates just drive the buyers. I also think during this COVID time, tenants and home buyers, they want to live in a place they want to live. So I think it's people have chosen how to spend their money differently. Like, the end times are coming. We want to be home. Let's live in a beautiful place. So we saw it with the tenants. Our biggest month of real estate in the past 19 months was April 2020. Soon as, everybody wanted to move. So I would say that what's really driving the market is people's desires to live in a place that maybe pre-COVID they wouldn't have stepped up and paid up for.
So you said April 2020, not April 2021.
That's right.
Because we were noticing it this year.
We rented, Farnham Realty Group is not only the number one firm for rentals in New Haven, in the county, it's also the number one firm for the state. Mm-hmm. So in 2020, when the first stimulus check came out, we rented like 73 apartments that month. Mm-hmm. Where normally we rent like 40 to 50 a month. And a slower month, like let's say in November or December, would be like 26, something like that.
So that's the rental market. As I understand, you also buy and sell houses. I mean, you're a broker as well, right?
Of course.
So you do rental management and you do brokering sales.
Yes. I mean, and we do commercial sales. That's what I, specialize in.
What can you define commercial sales? What are those?
So anything
Offices.
That's office, multi-use, multi-family, houses that are 4 units and up, things that you would need a commercial loan for. Like during COVID last summer, we brokered a 72-unit deal in West Haven. That's commercial, multi-family, residential.
So commercial is anything that's making money as opposed to a single-family owner-occupied house.
Yes, for investors and even, a family could buy, or, a buyer could buy a multifamily house, live in a in a floor, but it's still considered residential because it's a residential loan.
Mm-hmm.
But, really just back to your question is, yes, the feeding frenzy is people, there's a shortage of houses, and people had to outbid each other to get what they wanted, to get that sort of dream vision of living in the home they wanted.
And what's your area, Carol? Are you the county mostly? Where's your concentration?
So, I'm from New Haven. We concentrate in New Haven, but, as the market's saturated, we are now Hamden, West Haven, Shoreline, North Haven, Wallingford. But I have young children, so I like to stay close to home. But the agents go all over the state. We've got rental listings in Hartford. People are selling houses. The team's selling houses everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And so, again, I want to ask you a question from my perch where I don't really know what I'm talking about and see if it's true. So the sense I had when COVID hit, people were fleeing cities like New York. And in the first wave, especially if they had money, so in other parts of the country, they leave in San Francisco and go into Texas, Florida, or like Montana, right? Real rural,
right,
where they can work
right.
remotely. But in Connecticut, it seemed like the first wave was in wealthier communities like Fairfield County, along the shoreline, and somewhat in Westville, because New York people were finding they can get these big houses for a tenth of what they paid in New York City if they had kids. And that then there was the second wave where it creeped into New Haven, where people were more permanently thinking of moving. Like if one person worked in New York and one in New Haven or near New Haven, they came here. I met one family. They came from Michigan. They wanted to be near family relatives, and they went to New Haven even though the job was in Fairfield. So then there were people who liked urban living, and community like that. Is that accurate? Is that still going on? Is the New Haven real estate market still hot?
Yes, I absolutely 100%. And I would agree with you. There was a first wave, like when it hit New Yorkers. So that means March, April, May, houses that were sitting on the market on the shoreline got snapped up. So a house that was listed or had been sitting for months, maybe a buyer went in March, April, May, and then closed June, July, August. So one community that we do work in is Groton Long Point.
Interesting.
Those houses would sit on the market for a year to 2 years, really high prices. Boom. Now there is no inventory, no rentals,
still
no houses for sale. Still.
Groton.
Right
What's
now.
in Groton besides Electric Boat?
So, there's beautiful shoreline. It's called Groton Long Point, and there's like a beautiful little yacht club, and there's summer camp program and tennis and stuff like that. So even New Yorkers went all the way up to Groton, and a house that was on the market for $3 million for 3 years sold. Now the seller got really lucky,
Wow.
So I think that COVID rescued a lot of people too, who either paid too much or was hoping for a high price
Mm-hmm.
But then the wave, Guilford, Madison, all of those towns, there's really no product. Now, I will say that, almost in the third quarter of 2021, there is definitely more inventory. Like, for example, we have a listing for a single family in Hamden that went on May 26th. We had 7 offers, picked the high one. It went on at $279. We had a contract over $300,000. 6 weeks into it, the buyer backed out, and now it's kind of a dead land, right? We don't have that critical mass. So now we're seeing it tapering down.
How much is it going for now?
Same price, and we have an offer at asking, but the seller is a little burned because he thought he was going to get over 300. And the reason the people backed out was, we just decided that, we really just don't really want it. It wasn't the financing and it wasn't the inspection. They just backed out. So that
is so interesting. And how many people now are competing for it?
So now we have, the showings are a little bit more sparse. We have 5 a weekend. We have a few offers, but we're really just trying to get that offer back for that seller. I will say to any real estate people listening, if you take a multiple bid and you take the highest bid, the minute the inspection passes, you should take a second deposit, because the person just didn't want the house or just locked it up and then talked themselves out of it and wasted the seller's 6 weeks. And now the market is different.
So now you just got a sample in just 1 minute of why you're listening today to Carol Horsford on Dateline New Haven, WNHH FM 103.5 FM. I think you might have just heard her pitch that property in Groton and made you want to run and buy it, unless, like me, you don't have $3 million. You heard her talk about how you roll with changing conditions that can change every day in a market to learn how to make a deal work. So she was talking about this house in Hamden. I was fascinated hearing that story because I think and tell me if you're right, Carol, she was just giving an example of how the market changes. So just
in 6 weeks.
Right.
Boom.
So how in May 26th, all these people were competing to buy a house in Hamden that was listed for $279. The winning bid was over $300, but then 6 weeks later it was withdrawn, and now they can't get above the $279 yet. And it's just at her point there, which I found most interesting, what you said, Carol, was that if you're a broker, get that second deposit after the inspection, because otherwise it might fall through.
And the more time that goes, the market is just going to change. Now, I just ran into somebody the other day after tennis, and he said, we're competing for something on the shoreline in Madison in the $2 million price bracket, and he keeps getting outbid. So I would say that maybe, more affluent properties still have those buyers, where sort of middle of the line ranches in Hamden that maybe in a non-COVID year would have went for $239 or $240, that even is still elevated at the $279, but there's not the competing market right now like there was 6 weeks ago. And just yesterday in North Haven, I got about 5 email alerts that prices are being reduced. So good agents, good sellers, they're talking their sellers into reducing the price now, because if not, it's going to sit. There's always a little bit of a lull as we go into school year, right? Mm-hmm. September, right? Back to school. Then you've got October break, November, Christmas, and then people start, thinking about.
But in any case, is it accurate? Listening to you, Carol, I get the sense that, okay, the market went crazy with COVID for everybody. Now, and maybe this because some people are having second thoughts and going back to cities, or the people who were all ready to stampede have mostly come through, that now you could still do better than you were doing for a mid-sized ranch before COVID, but you're not going to hit lotto.
Yes, for that type of product, yes.
Yeah. Jaywan
it's all timing, too.
Mm-hmm. And Jaywan... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, my brother is the CEO of this camp in upstate New York, and his boss wants to buy a house in, Montana, right? And he asked me, what should I do? Should I pay up right now for the house? What's my plan? He was all frantic. And I said, you know what? Just calm down and wait to the winter. The winter, the prices start dropping.
I knew a bunch of people moved to Westville, young families, in the last year for different reasons. I didn't have to do with COVID. And I said, don't buy, rent for a year, because it seemed like a house next year is going to be a lot more sanely priced than this year.
Well, it would be almost nigh impossible to find a single family rental in Westville. Those just come up so infrequently. And also Westville has such a beautiful housing stock.
Yeah, it does.
The construction is just beautiful. And there's even some beautiful mid-century moderns, up by the golf course and the crop circle.
I love all that. Jaywan Carter asked, Carol, besides supply and demand, what drives the real estate market? Thanks for listening, Jaywan.
I would say people's emotions. In the past 19 months, it's been really emotional. I think more than financial in the previous years. People want what they want and they're willing to pay for it. I would also say trends of belonging. People just don't get married and then register for the set of sterling silver and the plates and the china and the hutch, and nobody has that anymore. So I think one of the trends that's driving people's choices are, I don't want all that stuff. I don't want to lug my stuff. I want something small. So micro apartments, or really good design, well-designed apartments, thoughtful layouts in kitchens. Those things I think are really affecting. So
New Haven's talking about promoting more micro apartments, auxiliary dwelling units, lowering Florida square foot ratio. Are you in line with that trend then? Do you think it makes sense that getting smaller,
Absolutely.
keep it affordable?
Absolutely. I'm consulting on a project downtown on Chapel between, state and church. And I think the smaller, the better. I actually kind of want to start a business where you come to me for your game of Scrabble. You come to me for your drill. You can rent a surfboard. You can borrow a boogie board. You can rent a wagon. And we have this like co-op of items that we lend. It's like a lending library, but for everything you would need if you want to do something once or twice, rather than accumulate.
So the idea is that you live small. In the old days, you want to have room so you can get together people and play Scrabble. You want to have room to have a boogie board stored. And now is the trend, and we saw this with the Corsair in New Haven, where there are a lot of amenities in the facility, but these very expensive apartments are very small. But then there's the pizza oven where everyone gets together, in the pool. In New York, I know that's a big trend for people who aren't rich. They rented a place where you could bump into the wall every time you try to turn around because the apartment's so small. But there's this common area where you work instead of in your apartment. There's this common area you hang out with people. So you think that's where we're going, at least for urban living.
And I think people don't want a lot of stuff because when you have stuff, your life is more complicated. Where are you going to store it? I mean, I just saw your article about, people's belongings. I think the younger generation are less attached to things. Therefore, they want smaller apartments so they don't have to buy stuff.
So they're here to stay.
They want to be more, they want to be more mobile, right? You just want to take suitcases. We're doing the lease up for the Elm, 104 Howe Street, and we're the first 5 people that have moved in, they came from a different location with a suitcase, and their plan was to buy stuff here at IKEA or Craigslist.
Wait, tell me a little more about that. So just so people know, I go by that every day. So next to 100 House Street, which is an old but fixed up apartment building, there was an empty lot. That's like across from where Mamoon's is, 1 block up toward Broadway. Yep. And that's a street that's getting built up fast. It's sort of on the periphery of downtown, right near residential Dwight. And the market for more apartments, there was all this land that could be built up. And one of the big new apartment buildings going up is called the Elm. I love that it's called the Elm. It's like within a stone's throw of Elm Street, right? It's Elm City. And so they hired you to find tenants for the building.
Correct.
Is there a demand? Is there a demand? And who are these people who want to rent?
So the most interest is in the studios and the 1-bedrooms. And the 1-bedrooms range from, 570 square feet up to just under 700. And the studios are 510 and 425.
People want to live in closets.
Correct. We had the most demand for those.
Wow. So what does that tell you? It does tell you smaller the better. People want to live small.
The smaller the better.
And are these young people?
The zoning, they didn't go for zoning relief, so they only built what they were allowed to build, which was 44 units, because they didn't want to go for the zoning relief to get more.
Right, fight with the neighbors.
To fight with the neighbors, because the Dwight neighborhood is very tight, and I'm sure that the neighborhood's going to love this building, but for the economics of the project.
And this isn't your bailiwick, but what cracks me up in the world of like idealists who aren't scrambling and making a lot of money is that there's this argument among people who want affordable housing. Half the people say, don't build up so many units, don't have it be all market rate. But then other people who have the same goals say, on Dwight Street, you'll have lower rents if you let people like the Elm build twice as high and be all market rate. Because then you'll get all the people who want to pay all that money for those apartments and are willing to pay more. And then there won't be all this market pressure on Dwight Street to charge its high rents. Basically, there's this build movement from people who actually are idealistic affordable housing people, especially on the West Coast, who say just let everybody build and let it be market rate because then you'll have enough supply and it'll cost less. Then there are other people who say that's theory. But in practice, when a lot of rich people move in and take over an area, that ups the rates for everybody. So it becomes a hot place where rich people come and then it pushes everybody else out. Then the other side says, look at practice, like Fairhaven. In the 90s, we built up 6 huge condo projects on either side of the Quinnipiac River, and they were supposed to be for wealthy people, and all but one ended up being for middle income, lower income, or Section 8 because it was overbuilt. So now you're on the ground floor. No one knows better than Carol Horsford in New Haven who's renting apartments and why. Seriously. No one knows better than you who's coming to move here and why. So who's right in that argument?
I would say that this particular developer, if someone had said, look, we'll let you go up 3 more stories, but we want 2 floors for affordable housing, he would have done it. Boom. No problem.
No, but he couldn't have afforded to without a subsidy, right? Because you can't make your money back without affordable
Uh,
housing unless you could jack
I
up the other rents more.
Well, the thing is if he's building the 6 floors right now, the 5 floors, there's 5 floors of residential. Obviously, that's where you're going to make your money. You would have built 2 more, and you would have broken even on those two.
But that's
But
still
it
not the
wouldn't
argument
matter.
I'm asking you. The argument that
I
those
would I
people are
would
making,
say
I'm sorry, the
I would
argument they're
say
making
that
is don't have them make it affordable. Have them build 5 more floors market rate. And then the people who will go into those extra 5 floors won't push rents up a block away on Dwight. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, I agree with it. Except for here's the stat. Ready? All the new construction in town leased. 18 High fully leased. The Audubon fully leased. Waiting list. The Whitney Modern fully leased, waiting list, and for sale. Right? So I think that the trend is, Paul, people want new, renovated apartments with air conditioning, dishwashers, microwaves, and washer and dryer in units. Period. That's what they want. And people who are 18, 19, 20, college students and up, they've lived in houses with that stuff because the age bracket is the students are younger. They've been born with an iPhone. You don't have people who are shopping from that generation who don't they're sophisticated. They're sophisticated shoppers. They know the market. There's so much information out there where when I started in this industry almost 15 years ago, it's a completely different city and it's a different market and your consumer is different.
That's so interesting. Michelle Ross Hickson is listening. She writes, I find it fascinating how what we are looking for has changed during COVID. Watching the tenants at the Audubon, it's lots of pets, lots of community and amenities. Are you leasing the Audubon, Carol?
No, the Audubon has their own on-house management. And I know Michelle. Hi, Michelle.
Thanks for the comment.
Pet friendly is huge. We're very pet friendly at the Elm, and Farnham Realty Group is very pet friendly.
And of course, as you know, on Fair Street, they built Chaplain Fair with the dog park in mind, saying people want pets.
Yes, and I think that some East Rock landlords, they don't allow pets. So the people with pets, I also think there's a lot of emotional support animals now that need to be accommodated. And certain old-timey landlords are not shifting with the times and still saying no pets.
See, I go to Retrieververse on Instagram, and I get all my happy feelings from the golden retrievers that I haven't cleaned their poop or feed them in the morning, take them for walks. So, Carol, who are these people? You're saying all the stuff is leased up. The Audubon, leased up waiting list. 18 High, leased up. Where is Whitney Modern? Is that the one like right by across from Science Hill? That used to be the Red Cross?
The American Red Cross,
yeah,
exactly, across from the church.
So who, and also is are they still doing great at on the State Street, State and Chapel? Are they still doing great across from a church and Chapel?
I think 360 State, it doesn't have I don't believe it has a waiting list, but I think you can get them. But that's 10 years old now, that product.
Isn't that funny?
Right?
Isn't that
and
funny?
The Corsair is 7 years old. Like now,
and are they fully leased?
Feels older.
Is the Corsair fully leased?
I don't know. I think the Corsair probably has availability, but it's also those big property management companies. They don't do maybe back-to-back rentals where most of the smaller property manager companies, you try to lease them back-to-back so you don't have a month of vacancy so that owner doesn't lose that income.
So, Carol, who are these people? So we're building more apartments than you and I have seen in our lifetime, fair to say. I'm a little older than you, but I mean, we haven't seen this kind of torrid pace of apartment construction as we've seen in the last couple of years. They're filling up. Who are these people? Who's renting all these new apartments?
I would say it's a mix. So let's just talk about the first 5 people that, moved into the Elm. I have sort of an elderly person who came with just suitcases, who's taking a job for 1 or 2 years, but really is looking for a place to retire. There's a couple of couples and a couple of single folk coming in for jobs. One person's parents are selling their house in Farmington and she needs an apartment. She moved down here. I would say.
But are these couples young or older?
I would say maybe 30s, 40s. 30s, 40s.
Do they have kids?
And
no, they obviously don't have kids if they're going to live in a closet.
Right. I don't think so. No, but like there's a couple that was a veteran. He's like just retired from the military and, came to town, is doing a program. I think it's a big mix. It's not just like at yale.edu emails anymore. It's people that love New Haven. We have a great city now. Food, restaurants, going out, shops, proximity, to Boston, to Massachusetts. The shoreline is here. You can hike. It's a nice place to live. You get 4 seasons.
So in other words, are these all people who weren't living in New Haven before?
Yes, correct. Yes.
So is there a lure? Again, I look at these trends from the outside. I don't know what I'm talking about because you're every day actually renting the apartments. From the outside, it looks to me that smaller university cities are hot. And they're not just hot since COVID. They've gradually gotten hot since their nadir in the 90s because young people just starting out, seniors who are retiring without kids anymore. Everything's without kids. That people like a small city where a lot of things are going on. You can go to theater, great restaurants, music. You walk, take really nice walks, see all kinds of kind of people, stop and have coffee or a drink. And you don't have the big bustle of a big city, but you don't have the boredom of a suburb for those people. And that it's not just New Haven. It's Cambridge, it's Brookline, it's Berkeley, it's like Palo Alto. Am I right about that? Is that what you're seeing? That you're saying at first it was all Yale.edu and eds and meds, but now it's people. You talked about Farmington. I'm talking about that weird building on Grand Avenue near near Olive. When you go back about half a block going east, it's set back. It doesn't even look nice. And all these people are retiring there from like Litchfield County and all this stuff because they like going to the Yale Rep. They like walking down to the museums. They don't have kids around. Am I right about that, Carol?
Absolutely. I would say that, like, I have a client, they're selling their really large home in Woodbridge. They have a home on the shoreline, but they want a place in town as well. They would buy or rent first floor, walkable with a dog.
Is that because they want to be able to go to the theater at night, go have a dinner, and not have to drive back to the suburbs?
Also the winter, the shoreline, if you have a beachfront property in the winter, it's not fun. It's cold. You think it's going to be really fun and nice. The wind whips you in the face. It's freezing. Mm-hmm. So I think people, want to be in town when the weather gets poor. I would also say that we have clients from New York City that are buying up multifamilies on Worcester Square because he's not ready to retire and leave New York City yet. But when he does, he wants to be able to move there. So he's bought 2 places already on the square.
So then now here, I'm going to get back to the policy question, which is not your job. It's my job because we do policy. You do the work. This is the debate we keep having that I think there's no simple answer to. So you're describing all these people coming to New Haven who are willing to pay more for a closet than I actually pay for my house. Is this a good thing or bad thing, or should we encourage it? Yesterday there was a debate in Worcester Square where next to where 2 huge apartment complexes are being built, there's another lot that's just an empty, trashed, dark, nobody goes there lot that was created by Crazy Urban Renewal on Fair Street, going to Worcester Square in the 60s. Nobody uses it, has no use. So the guy who's building a big 200-unit apartment says, I'll build another one there. And a bunch of people fought it, saying we need affordable housing and we do market rate. And I stand back there, I'm no expert. I say, wait a second. That was going to no use. So if all of Carol Horsford's kind of people rent there, we're going to get taxes. We're going to get people who are going to go create jobs by supporting businesses, and not a single person who's already here will lose an affordable rent. In fact, rents might go down because supply will go less. Is that a policy take? Or some people said, no, you're wrong. Yesterday, some people said there's not enough affordable housing. People's rents are going up from these big property management firms. We need you, if you're going to build with a promise of affordable housing. And the other side comes back and says, no, we don't need people getting REITs or others to build our affordable housing. We need to do that. We just need them to grow our tax base. Who's right?
So I have super interesting, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit of policy myself. I think I want to use the word trickle down. I know that's like, trickle down economics, but there's sort of a trickle down. Like as the new apartments get built, someone will move from, let's say, from the Corsair to 18 High. Now he's living with a pool right in the center of town. Then the apartment at the Corsair gets rented from the guy who lives across the street in an $1,800 2-bedroom. Then that apartment unrenovated, no microwave, no dishwasher, no central air, that apartment actually doesn't get rented because that landlord isn't smart enough to adjust his rent during when there's people looking, ends up with a vacant apartment on the, going into the winter, 1,400, 1,500. We get a Section 8 applicant and say, look, this Section 8 could go right here. It's 1,500. Boom. That's what's happening. People are moving, and the landlords who aren't renovating and keeping up with it, that's whose rents are going down. That creates the affordable housing.
Now that again, and that's so fascinating. So that confirms my preferred narrow vision of how it's working.
That's my opinion.
But there's one last part here, and this is not for you to solve because that's not your job. How do we get decent Section 8 housing? So if Section 8 housing is going still a lower rent than the 1,800, so it's 1,500, but the landlord's not doing the job of fixing it up. So they're getting that Section 8 rent, which has built into it money for renovation and upkeep. And they're pocketing those profits instead. So the Section 8 family is living at an incredibly high rent for a 2-bedroom.
But now they live on Mechanic Street. And before they were living on Goodrich. Their kids are going to the East Rock Magnet School.
Which is a good school.
Somebody from West Haven moves to Goodrich Street.
So that's better than what people realize. But where I'm still hung up is that Section 8 family is still paying more for a 2-bedroom than I pay for my house. And that's because this landlord is making its profit, not you, the landlord, is making its profit by not reinvesting in the property. So while that Section 8 family today has a good deal, the Section 8 family tomorrow is going to have a less good deal because the property hasn't been kept up, but the taxpayer is still paying the $1,500. Not your problem to solve.
But I actually think I think that what I'm trying to describe to you is the mindset of the person who's owned a home for years and said, oh, I could get this rent for 20 years at this price. Now I can't anymore. He's either going to learn a hard lesson that he's going to go vacant, or he needs to spend the money and upgrade the property, or they'll sell.
And that's why I love talking to you, because you know what's really happening on the ground. My concern down the road is, though, if he doesn't learn that hard lesson before he learns it, will the federal government be artificially propping up the rent by continuing to pay that guy $1,500 and somebody has nobody else to go?
They inspect the apartment. They inspect it.
And they do a crappy job. They kept Church Street South inspected until the last minute was considered uninhabitable. 300 apartments for years where the roof was leaking.
There's 3 different types of funding, right? There's federal funding for housing vouchers, there's state, and then there's city, right? And each subsidy, each source has a different inspection process. So City of New Haven, they inspect their elderly apartments every 3 years, families is every 2 years. It used to be every year, but it was just, I guess,
not enough people.
They cut the program. I think it was that. J.D. Amelia is a contracted source that manages the federal program and the state program. They run like a tight ship. The women in those offices, we've known them for years. That's inspected every year. So state and Fed money, the inspections happen every year. And if you don't pass your inspection, they put you in abatement and you don't get paid.
But Carol, look what happened. But look, it is a process. That's how it's supposed to work. Look at Church Street South. 301 apartments. For decades, the roof was never fixed or replaced. People getting asthma. I went in there. I watched someone peel the ceiling off. It got renewed every year. The inspectors went to the same 5 apartments that weren't falling apart yet and passed them. And then all of a sudden they went...
Realty, we're happy to manage something
Yeah. So then they went from being totally fine to live according to inspections to being such a hazard to people's survival that 300 families had to be immediately moved out. So what you're saying is right in theory. Does it work that way in practice? Again, not your job. I'm just wondering.
I think that, it depends. Small landlords are sometimes easier to work with than really large landlords. And
they get screwed more.
Well, it's back to emotions. It's emotions. It's emotional. I have a client that's like, we're going to repair this apartment. It doesn't need to be painted, but we're going to do it. I actually, there's a girl who wants to move into one of our new apartments. She wanted to take it as is. I said, absolutely not. I cannot let you live here without me painting and changing these lights. I said, do you mind giving us 5 days? She said, no problem. So it's an emotional choice of how you want to be a landlord. I also want to say that I have a client who has an idea that he wants to start a property management fund that is actually only give a return of like 2 or 3%, almost like a social justice fund, where the property management company, it's not there to make money for the landlord. It just produces a 2 or 3% return. But we offer the management services to, I don't want to call them slumlords, but landlords who are not as educated as others. And
that's a really charitable way of putting it.
We create better lives for those tenants because there's a property management company that's working with an underprivileged, let's say, landlord who doesn't have the funds to do it. It's actually a really interesting concept. We're just trying to figure out how to kick it off and how to staff it. So like somebody that has houses in Fairhaven or whatever, we say, hey, look, we'll do your management for you because we want to create better lives for the folks that live in your house.
Carol
sort
Horsford,
of a nonprofit investment.
New Haven's leading commercial realtor. How many people work at Farnham Realtor?
So probably like 30.
And is it hard to get a number because they're kind of independent agents, a lot of them, because they get commissions?
We have independent agents. We also have a lot of seasonal folk. We have a landscaping crew. Like, I don't know if you follow our Instagram, but our head of maintenance, Gene Guerrero, who came as a political refugee from Venezuela, he posted a picture of like 10 guys for the turn crew night. So I'm not quite sure.
And he's working for you instead of Juan, who's another political refugee from Venezuela. Right. I guess we got enough Venezuela to go around.
No, you're right. He's from Venezuela.
So you're listening to Carol Horsford on Dateline New Haven. Sorry, Carol, I just have to legally tell people what they're listening to. WNHH-FM 103.5, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. And we're talking about the person who probably knows better than anyone else in New Haven who all these people are who are moving into all these new apartments because she rents to them and manages many of them, Carol Horsford. So I want to take a step back. You talked about timing. You talked about understanding the market. You built up a business for this moment. So this moment happened in New Haven, and here you were growing this property management firm, this commercial real estate firm, and you were ready to step in and do it. When did you started 15 years ago, Carol?
So, that's a funny story is I actually was working in New York City and I moved home to Prospect Street. My parents owned a house. My dad went to Yale.
You grew up in New Haven.
Yes. Yeah. I went here till third grade. Then we moved to Trumbull and I went to Christian Heritage School there and then moved back. My dad went to Yale and I went to Southern. I graduated from Southern, and then I worked in New York City for French companies. I speak French. I went to school in France. I have a master's in art history from the University of Strasbourg. And I moved back home in 2007, and I couldn't get a job. There was no French luxury jobs. And I met,
not a big demand, huh?
No, I met Shmuley Hecht, who lives on Prospect Street, one day because his son got loose out of his house and I found him. So that's how we met. So I worked for Shmuley for 5 years. He got me licensed and basically trained me. And I learned I would be nowhere without everything that I learned from him. But I wanted to start my own company. So in 2012, I left Pike and put my license with Levy Miller Moretz, Steve Miller, who is also a big mentor of mine. He taught me the commercial ropes. And then I got my broker's license in 2013. So I was doing like a little bit of property management as a salesperson under him. And then, I got the brokerage in February of 2013. And I just started. I just hit the ground running. There was no business plan. It was like, hey, we want to help. We're here to help. We're happy to help. And one of my agents, Peter DeGangi, he runs the leasing department now. He was with me at Pike, and then he came over, and he's been with me ever since. So I'm really lucky that I have people that have been with me a long time.
So you built up a company that both buys and sells commercial real estate. Brokers the sale of commercial real estate. And it seems like a big part is you manage commercial real estate.
Yeah, so we do 5 things. 1, I spend my time buying and selling commercial real estate. We do residential sales, residential rentals, commercial leasing. I love to do commercial leasing. I love to work with nonprofits. And then the last thing we do is landscaping, maintenance, property management. That kind of all goes together. Mm-hmm. So The company just got bigger. I started with like 25 units under management, then 75, then 225, then 300, then 405. Now we're about 700.
Whoa.
Units.
So 700 apartments you're managing?
Yes.
Apartments
and
and offices?
Third party. Mostly apartments, some commercial.
Mm-hmm. And that's around Greater New Haven?
Greater New Haven, mostly in New Haven, but Hamden, Westville.
Mm-hmm.
And the good thing, one of the reasons I wanted to start my own company was, you want to be in charge, and I wanted to put the tenants first, and I wanted to create a community for people. And we, my staff calls them, we're the Farnham Army, right? Because when you need something, the Farnham Army will show up and be there for one another. And our mission is enriching lives through real estate. And that means I met a guy at a pool party. I said, hey, if you go get your license and work for me, I'll reimburse you the class. The next day he signed up. Now he's been leasing agent of the month for 6 months in a row. He used to work food retail. Now he has a different life.
And now you're the number one commercial agent in all of Connecticut and commercial sales agent. So you're doing well. What we
had a good year, yeah.
So the time's been good for you. But one thing that wasn't good for you is you got COVID.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So, you know what? Because we were marked as essential because of the property management, we worked all during 2020, and we made it through all of 2020, no problem. And then in March of 2021, one agent got COVID, and then everybody got tested, and the people that, obviously we quarantined. But the day we figured it out, we were at 660 Winchester doing a volunteer day for, that Christian
Community Action. Yeah. What were you doing?
We were there. Because I'm doing the leasing for one of their spaces there, but it was full of donations that Lindy Lee Gold had organized for that new tenant base. So we bought shelving and organized the stuff and folded all the linens and put it upstairs for them. And it was basically that day. So anybody who was there that was exposed to this one agent, we had to quarantine.
And then you got it in March.
Yeah, so I got it, and then
was it with Delta yet or no? It was pre-Delta?
No, it was pre-Delta.
Thank God. And, so what was it like? How bad were you hit?
So my kids and my partner went to a hotel so that I could quarantine alone because they were negative. Mm-hmm. And then after 7 days, it was like, okay, you can come back in the house in the basement, but then they tested positive immediately.
Oh my God.
So I was alone for 7 days. Then they were alone in a hotel going to school and back and forth. And then we had to then quarantine another 10 days.
Did anyone get really sick?
So I actually was, the thing that really hit us the worst, we called it the COVID blackness, is that we're all so social. I'm such a social person, and a lot of the people who work here, we thrive off of being together. And we got sad. We got really sad. I was really sad.
Did you have to go? Did you think you might have to go to the hospital? Did you have trouble breathing? Did you have shakes?
I did go to the hospital, and they kept me for one night because my oxygen levels were low. But honestly, I think it was just the lack of seeing my family and being with my team that just made me so sad. I have a video of myself crying. It was really bad. And
I'm glad you're better now. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And then I needed an inhaler because I couldn't breathe. And then I told you I had that surgery. I had an unrelated surgery in the middle of April. So I was really kind of out of commission for the whole month of April and the first 2 weeks of May. But the team got better.
Is it possible for you not to work for 6 weeks? Were you kind of sneaking your iPhone on and selling a property or something?
It was torture. It was absolute torture to be alone by myself. But I have to say that it was probably good for my mental health. And I thought of a lot of things, and I think I made a lot of personal growth.
So now you're back and rearing, and now you're back and rearing to go. And J1 Carter says that was a big statement on adjusting to a different career option. So before we let you go, Carol, tell us about what's next for you, for Farnham Realty?
That's an interesting question. I think that I'm just an entrepreneur at heart, and I love to think of businesses, and I really would like to start, some sort of new business. I'm just trying to figure out what it is. Maybe it's that, 501c3 property management company, but I really do want to do something cool. Or maybe it's the lending library if I found the right spot downtown. Maybe it's a plant rescue, but we're still going to be here. We're still going to be renting apartments. We're still going to be selling buildings.
And in the meantime, you're at the New Haven's historic moment of a building boom. You're on the front lines, bringing all these new people to town and getting them set up with their microwaves and in-apartment washer dryers.
And I have a huge team behind me. So the Farnham Army, is there for you. Call us if you need help with anything. We're happy to help.
And I know a bunch of them. And if I were ever alone in a dark alley and someone's coming after me, I would want the Farnham Army behind me. Carol Horsford, thank you so much for joining us today.
It was fun.
Yeah, I really loved having you. I hope we have you back. Good luck. I'm glad you feel better. Knock 'em dead.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening, for comments. And we're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience. Performing
Professor David Shevin.
Yep. Performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.